going online, you develop your craft and your talents, and you develop your audience online, and then it follows you. You know, it's a way to put yourself out in the world that really wasn't around when I was in college, for instance, you know, in the 1940s. All right, let's move on to Dara. Would you go next? And then David and David and Dan. I just spoke with Dan's brother, Todd, yesterday, so it's fresh on my mind. Anyway, so Dara, David, Dan.
I had actually kind of probably an almost like dovetaily version of like what Marnina just told, which is I loved acting and singing and dancing and grew up in New York City and like, you know, saw Cats when I was 6 and was obsessed with Saturday Night Live. And Marnina, I watched Love Gilda last night and she reminds me of you. So I hope, and I love her, so I hope that that's a compliment.
It's a huge compliment. She's literally behind me on this bookshelf.
Oh my God, I love her. And I wanted to be her, except I studied at the Neighborhood Playhouse School of Theater and was definitely not talented enough to do it. My Jewish parents were like, you know, there's a lot of other things you can do that are like this, but not this. And then I went to college and had this like tiny scholarship in economics, and like through that started realizing that there was like a business part of this, and I had this sort of right brain, left brain. Like what's very weird is I became a writer, but that was not the plan. The plan was like, I love this business. I love creating and telling stories and performing and like making things with people, but like I didn't really know what the path was going to be. I kind of just tried a bunch of things, and then when I got into the Peter Stark producing program at SC, was like I thought it was like maybe producer works, right? Like I'll be a producer because they get to like do business stuff and be kind of have their hands in everything. And I was trying to like find scripts to option, and they were so bad. And so I was just like, I can write better than this. And writing had been like a thing that kept tapping me on the shoulder. And I kept being like, leave me alone. I don't want to, leave me alone. Which, you know, now at the ripe old age of 44, I understand why I felt like that. Because like in terms of, I think I'm in the middle. This is going to be that moment in City Slickers where Billy Crystal goes and talks to like the class, and like the kids are like, what's happening right now? Because you guys are catching me in this moment of like, I'm like in my midlife crisis. Like I did the things, right? Like I love this job. This job's amazing. I ran through life checking all the boxes, and guess what, guys? It's an amazing job that's still just a job. And, you know, the aha moment that I'm having is like, okay, so how do I enjoy my job and love my job and also find a way to like love my life and not have it be my life? So that's my Billy
Thank
Crystal.
you. Those are very wise words.
It's just the job, Dara. Wow. First of all, thank you. It's nice to speak to all of you, and I love all these people on this panel. They're pretty amazing. I got started actually in animation. I kind of left college with my political science degree and all the doodles in my notebook, and was like, oh, I should be in animation. And I didn't really know anyone in animation, and so I did this crazy thing in retrospect where I would call variations of the studio numbers and get people's names off their voicemail and then call them back during daylight hours and try to set up meetings, which worked to some degree. People are really nice, actually, and I was able to exploit their kindness to get some meetings in town. And I was at a Shabbat dinner kind of complaining that for all these meetings I had nothing to show for it. And I happened to be sitting next to a guy who was producing an animated film and was actually staffing up. And so I went in and did like a training animation exercise to see if I was a good enough artist. And I got like an assistant job on this film in animation, which was amazing. And I did that that's actually my first Hollywood job. And I worked in animation, and then I sort of switched over to animation development for a little bit and realized, oh, I really want to be storytelling. And I was one of those development junior executives who gave too many writerly notes because I think I just wanted to rewrite those scripts. And I went to film school, which I loved and adored, and accrued a ton of loans that I'm still repaying to this day. But I did meet my writing partner in film school, and that was pretty awesome. And we were sort of the comedy guys in film school. In film school, the real cachet is kind of to tell your personal life of suffering and woe, and we were kind of writing comedies. And so we would get kind of backhanded compliments that we were commercial and it might someday work. But anyway, but we met and we started collaborating there, which was awesome and great. And I will just tell you one story, which is an early story. When I first moved to town after school and was having a hard time finding an agent and getting work and getting more meetings. So I had a friend who told me that Larry David was like buying up Curb Your Enthusiasm episodes and that like you could submit stories. And my friend was like, oh, look, I'm sending my stuff in. My agent's going to send my stuff in. You can piggyback on that and send it in. And so I wrote this idea, and at the last minute, the agent was like, I'm not sending your stuff in. I don't represent you. I don't need to do this. You're competing against my client. And so in a sort of uncharacteristic moment, I hand wrote a letter to Larry David, kind of bitching out this agent for sort of double crossing me and not submitting my stuff. And I said, if you wanted to contact me, you could just reach out to me directly. You could cut out the middleman. And I sent him this idea. And just after I did, I just immediately was like, that was not the right thing to do. This is a terrible idea. I had immediate shame and was like, why did I do that? That was crazy. And I sent it to like his office, his manager. I like blanketed the town in this story idea. And so every day like that I didn't hear, and I'd been in like a couple writers' rooms and I knew that like there's this pile of like stack of papers. So like, he's never gonna see this thing. And like, maybe that's a good thing because that wasn't an awesome thing to do necessarily. But like 5 months go by and then I finally got a call from Larry David and he's like, we're making that episode. You don't get any credit. You don't get any credit. We're gonna give you a little check. But dude, we're doing that episode of Curb Your Enthusiasm. And for me, that was like a moment I was like, oh, okay, like I can I kept it, by the way, the longest possible amount of time you can keep a message in storage as Larry David's curmudgeonly voice saying he liked this idea. But for me, that was a moment I was like, oh, I can do this. Like it's really hard and it's ludicrous and it's a wild business, but oh, this would be amazing to keep doing.
That's quite a story. I mean, I think that probably many of the people here on the panel and maybe in the room as well would love to have a conversation with Larry David to ask him what he is thinking, how he thinks, because it's really just so spectacularly anchored in the Jewish experience and also anchored in like kind of anchored in a curmudgeonly old man. Speaking of the old man, let's go to Dan Schatz, not because he is terribly old, but because as you read in the bio, that is one of the shows he's working on, and it's pretty awesome. If you haven't seen it, highly recommend.
Thank you, Esther. This is beyond awesome to be included in this group. A lot of them I know very, very well. And this is just great. And to see Saul is always the best part. Quick, how do we do this quickly? You guys summed this, your stories up really amazingly well. The Marnina, you're perfect. Like, let's skip years, which is what I might have to do. I was seduced very early. I just loved movies and television as a kid. I was the kind of kid who would sneak downstairs in the middle of the night to watch when no one was awake. And my first real entree into this business was my father, who is just a businessman in Philadelphia, having nothing to do with the movie business. And some very shady producer said, hey, come and produce this very horrendous B movie in LA. Like, just help me find the money for it. And my father said, okay, I'll try it. And he lost all the money. It was a terrible experience. He was like, I'm never doing this again. But for 3 days, he brought, as Esther introduced, my brother Todd and myself, I was 9 years old, out to LA to come see this film being made. And we shot till 4 a.m. We stayed at the Chateau Marmont. We got to see a guy sliding down a hill with cranes and all the magic of cinema, even though the movie was disastrous. And he still takes credit today for that being the moment where I just got to see it firsthand at that age, and that imprint that was on me never left. And he's actually beyond right. Like, it was that moment of just saying, wait, this is a job. Like, people are actually doing this. This isn't just like people make this. They do this every day. And I just continue to be obsessed with it and force teachers at school to do courses on it. Like, can we do an independent theory class? I don't know. Is that a thing? Can you study this? Let's try it. And just all the way through to Wesleyan, where I was mentored by one of the greatest film theorists in the world named Janine Basinger, who was an amazing mentor. And that university connection, as Dara spoke about, like there's a lot of stuff that when you go to these programs, it was a liberal arts education at Wesleyan, but the film program was so incredible that I really connected with a lot of the alumni that came back to teach courses. And that sucked me out to LA. And the only reason my mom was okay with LA, she's like, I think David Light's out there, so you're going to be okay. The Light, everything's going to be all right. So I was very protected by the Light family early on. But I started working with a director who did the National Treasure movies, a guy named John Turtletaub, who was an amazing partner and mentor. But I always wanted to write, and I wanted to produce, and I wanted to run shows. And our company had never done TV before, and I pushed our company to get into television. And now we at that company, while I was there for many years, we made a bunch of TV shows that Esther listed. And since then, for the last 10 years, I partnered with an amazing writer named John Steinberg, who David and I grew up with, and Saul grew up with. And we've been partners in crime in running these really diverse and fun shows, all different types. My feel about being in this business and why I think it's so special and just hearing everyone else's stories is we get to do different things every single day. Like, it is, every day is a surprise. Every day is something new. And I cannot believe, in doing this for 25 years, like I never dealt with that situation before. And it's what makes it exciting. It's what makes it challenging. It's what makes it interesting, but we just get to tell stories. And that's all I wanted to do early on. I think that's why I love movies. I just want to tell stories with amazing collaborators and continue to build on that. And now, after all of these years, my father, who was like, I never want to do movies again, this is terrible, gets to hang out with Jeff Bridges. And that is, it's pretty exciting for him. So it went full circle, where he got to look back on that terrible experience and go, all right, it worked out for my son, and he's done all right. So I'm very grateful to him.
Wow.
I didn't stop offering to pay for law school until I was running a television show.
Well, it sounds like Dad never had a chance to do anything else, and his brother as well. They're just like lifers in this business, which is awesome, because, as you know, as so many of you have said before, you know, it's a challenging space to occupy. And, you know, Marnina's comment about if you do anything else, you know, that's something that has been parroted back and forth between parents and children considering careers in the arts for generations, I'm sure. But I'm wondering if all of you could just think for a minute about what Hollywood has taught you about failure and success, because sometimes it's actually like a really fine line. Like, you produce something and it gets produced. Is that the success? Or it makes money. Is that the success? It doesn't make enough money. Does that mean that what you did was a failure? So if you could just think about this in terms of your own experience and tell us a little bit about what these concepts of failure and success mean to you after however many years you've been spending in this business.
I mean, sorry, Marnina, do you want to go? Because this one's a lot. I mean, there's therapy for this. There's vodka for this.
Dara and I talk about this in synagogue sometimes.
Dan Schatz and David Light and I have talked about this for so many hours, sober and not. Look, this is also a capitalism conversation. Like, I don't know how many people in this room or in the Zoom room and in the physical room are like actually trying to do this for a living, or if you're just like, I wonder what it's like out in Hollywood. But for those people who aren't even doing what we're doing, like, that's a capitalism question, right? Like, what does success mean to you? Is it your bank account? Is it how many likes you have on your Instagram? Is it how many people watched your stuff? Is it simply like writing your first piece? Is it self-publishing? Is it publishing? Is it owning? I mean, those are like highly, highly personal questions. I would say that the healthiest people that I know in this business, including the people on this panel, are asking themselves that question constantly. Because the people that we know that are the most successful people that you can think of in Hollywood, and I know a lot of them, and so do these guys, are so much more miserable than you'd think they are. There is no amount of success in a capitalistic or fame paradigm that will fill that void. I actually highly recommend, if people are looking for like something that will answer a lot of these questions for you, Rick Rubin's most recent book, The Creative Act, is freaking fantastic. And it actually voices a lot of this in a much more cogent way than I will be able to. I have to, for me personally, like to make it personal, like successes, I just survived a year. I just took the last 5 years of my life. I got 2 television shows off the ground. I survived a global pandemic. I single parented my way through it with no help. My daughter seems to still be alive and somewhat in the vicinity of emotionally healthy. And I managed to like try a couple of relationships in there, one of which is still going. That's what I got, guys.
It's pretty
That
good.
sounds like a full dance card, and like very, you know, I'm in awe of that. I didn't produce 2 television shows or any of these other things. So now I have to go just figure out like what I'm going to do with my life. I'll be right back. So, all right.
Yeah, I mean, I used to describe myself for a while as a writer who kind of specialized in writing shows that never get made, basically. And so, you know, it was like, you know, the sweet spot. I could kind of sell the idea, I could write the pilot or the script, and I just couldn't get over the hump necessarily. And while in a way, it kept me sane because I didn't necessarily deal with the next level of craziness. It's really frustrating because you feel like, wow, it's here, and I just can't make it over that next little speed bump. And also, I don't get the joy of collaborating at the next level, and also of sort of sharing this out in the world so that people can connect to it. So I don't know, it really is. I do look at projects I worked on that I was really passionate about that didn't go, and I wonder about them, and I wonder about, because I do love the work, and I put so much into it, and I wonder what sort of separates those ideas that do get made. And I don't know, it's something it's a question I ask myself on a daily.
It's like Esther, this question is so catching all of us at the perfect time, where it is, because we're all, a lot of us are similar age and just sort of hitting this certain time in our life where kids are a certain age and what do we want in our life. And this is I am trying to do 2 shows at the exact same time in 2 different countries, and it's pretty rough, and you just say, wait, I worked so hard. I got to this pinnacle place of doing everything that I had been dreaming about. And you start going, I've been up in Vancouver for a year and see my kids every 2 weeks for 36 hours. And you start just questioning a lot of those things. Though I still love it so much. And it's important for my kids and my family to see that. But to the initial question, I've never picked a job for money, ever. I've been fortunate enough where it has always been, are we going to jump into this because it is something a story I want to tell? I've never just taken a money job. And I feel grateful for that, because it is, you got to look your kids in the face. I got to look my wife in the face and say, this is worth it. Like, this is important enough for me, for our family, for the story that I'm telling, for you guys to be able to see Dad's commitment to this, what he's doing, that is a good lesson for our, our legacy, so it is, but it's a tricky thing to deal with. Like, you're constantly managing, because it is all encompassing. A lot of people who come into this business, I'll meet with a lot of young people and giving them advice and talking about strategy and what to do to get their foot in the door. And you just very quickly see, like, a lot of people are like, oh yeah, I'm going to test it out for a year. Let's see what it's like. It's like, doesn't really work that way. Some people it takes 15 years. Some people they get it really quickly and then they fall off very quickly and then they have to get back up again. Some people it takes, it takes a while. The resilience is crucial and you gotta love this. Like Marnina with acting, it's like it's like I'm meant to be an actor. Like I have to do this. However it's going to shape itself, it's part of my DNA. I need to do this. And it's pretty important to have that because you have to push through a lot. No matter how successful you get, no matter what you do, you're constantly weighing this and balancing this out at every step of the way and making really tough decisions for yourself. But we also all look at it and you kind of hate that you even complain about it because you're so like, wait, I'm so fortunate, but you do, with everything in life, you start weighing, where I want to be, what I want to prioritize. And that balance will never go away.
And that's also a little bit of fun. I don't know if we're going to get into this, but that's a function of the changing business a little bit too. Like Dan and David and I have talked a lot about this. Like we all moved here to LA so we could like do the thing and have a life and, sort of make those things work. And instead all the production is now like in Canada or Atlanta or New Mexico. And that has been incredibly challenging for those of us with families.
I always think about Dan Ariely, the Israeli sociologist, psychologist. And I heard this at an ICAR event back when I was working there as the program coordinator, like years ago. And it sticks with me all the time, which is like this comparative thinking that we all get trapped into. Like as soon as you move, like you're like, okay, I'll have made it when I move to like, I get my house. And then when you get the house, you see the people on the block who have the nice car, and then you need to get the nice car. And then, you need to send your kids to the nice school. And there's just like, anytime your circles change, like you're seeing it through those eyes, those comparative eyes. And like, it's just horrible. It's just terrible because then you'll never feel like you made it. And it's really sad to me to see friends of mine who I look to be like, wow, like they really have done it. And like they're like really a working actor and, they don't have a side job at all. And like, they're working all the time. And when I talk to them, they feel like they haven't made it because they're looking at the other people, ahead of them. And even like at Sundance, I had to keep reminding myself, like this is it, like, and it's reality, like things go wrong, like you miss things, you are cold and you get turned away from the wait list line that you were waiting in for so long, and the ticket link is broken and you don't have the audience you meant to have, and like, just to be like, but we made it and this is huge. And I think like that's the big thing I learned from the Hollywood business, that I think applies to all people, is just like to love the moment that you're in, and to appreciate that, like, this is it, this is part of it, and to celebrate the smallest things too.
Well, one of the things that is unusual about an arts career, and specifically about acting and producing and just being in this Hollywood space, is that there's no one way to move along the path, right? So like when I graduated college, like if you wanted to be a writer, you had to work for a publishing company, and then you would get to look at other books and figure out if this is a writer of books, and that's not the case here. You're not going to medical school, traipsing through the curriculum, and then ending up with the same training as everybody else, and then getting placed in various places. It's about, the idea. I love what Marnina said about comparative thinking, and that is for a lot of people to be thinking about themselves in comparison to other people. And because there's no one way, if anybody has seen The Mandalorian, this is the way. That's one of the things that they say, but there's no one way. There's no halakha, this one path. And speaking of halakha, which is the Jewish path that we walk on, I'm curious to what extent your Jewish identity has come through in your work. How do you translate your Jewish identity, either on the set or in the actual work or in receiving the varying vicissitudes of Hollywood that happen on a daily basis? How does your Jewish identity enter into the picture for you?
For me, as an actor, it's been like most roles that I get have something to do with Jewishness, because I read very Jewish, and like I embrace that, and because I feel very Jewish, and it's like a big part of my life. And the other thing I do is mentoring B'nai Mitzvah students and like being a fake rabbi as an officiant. So like, it's very much in my life and important to me. And like, I feel passionately about like Jews portraying Jews on screen. And I think that we might get into that later, because for me, like that is a lot of my work. And I love that because I feel connected to my Judaism and to characters who even have different Jewish practice and Jewish identities than my own. And in a lot of what I've written to the hashtag not a rabbi videos, where I don't really explain holidays, those are, also very Jewish. And yeah, I think for me, it's just like, because it's right there and it feels like easy and fun to do, and connected for me. And I like getting to do those things with nuance. I think that's what's important to me, is to not be playing into Jewish stereotypes, but to let any Jewish role I play be a fully fleshed out character that the audience can connect with. Or, I can be cartoony too. I like being cartoony as well. I think not playing into stereotypes feels important.
When I first moved to town, I would go on some pitch meetings, and inevitably people would find the fact that I was married to a rabbi was far more interesting than any pages I had worked up for the meeting. And so we usually would spend the meeting talking about my amazing, awesome rabbi wife. And also like people, there's another phenomenon that would happen, which is that people would also sort of confess their like Jewish sins to me. There'd be, tell me about the bacon they had, and the double bacon cheeseburger, which is weird because, that's not really my job, but whatever, I would absolve them of those sins. No, but actually, the truth is I was like, oh, I should write about this. I haven't, directly written about this before. And the first pilot I ended up selling to NBC, which did not get made, was
great.
Thank you, Dan. Was called Morningside Heights, and it was about seminary, and it specifically was about Seminary Row in New York, which was kind of this hotbed of spirituality, and it was about young clergy-to-be struggling with like the great mysteries of the world, and also just trying to find a date. And so for me, that was really like my way of, I wrote it kind of as a little love letter to my wife, but also it managed to sell too. And so while I haven't written directly, on such a Jewish topic since then, it is sort of, the bedrock under a lot of things that I do and who I am. And so it's in there. And, often sermons and conversations, they're all kind of become the grist for the mill for ideas I'm working
on. It's funny that you bring up Sharon, because it's also, I bring up my brother, who everybody knows very well, and who's a Jewish educator, because essentially every meeting I go to, it's like, yeah, Todd did my kid's bar bat mitzvah. So they're more interested in him than me. But a lot of people joke about John Steinberg and myself. We grew up together. We went to Hebrew school together with David. We're just Philadelphia Jews who, somehow everybody in our scripts somehow sound Jewish. Like, oh, we are the first ones to figure out how to make Jeff Bridges sound Jewish, or Percy Jackson sound Jewish, or it's just when it's in your DNA like that, it just exudes. But David I don't know if I ever told David this story, but he'll appreciate that. John and I, when we're sitting and we're struggling with a story, right? We're sitting there and we're up till all hours of the night, can't figure out how to break this story. It's not working. We always pray that it's Yom Kippur. And the reason why we pray that it's Yom Kippur is every single Yom Kippur, when Sharon Brous does her sermons, she fixes our story. There's something that she says somehow that opens it up, that makes us think about the world differently, that has us, second guess everything we did, but then fixes it somehow. So it's literally a big joke. It's like, all right, Yom Kippur is next week. We're going to be fine. We're going to be fine. Sharon will fix this. And it kind of works. And I think it's because what you get from the relationships that you get from this community, hearing from people like Sharon Brous and many of the other people like my brother, there's just this sense of sort of purpose and connection and how people relate to each other and how to think, that sometimes you forget about that. And then you just need someone to just open your eyes to something in the right moment at the right time. And then that's what inspires you. And that could be at synagogue or at shul, that could be just in your everyday, but there's something about being in that community and being inspired by that community that just inspires me, and helps me every day through my path. And it's also the community stuff, because making a TV show or a movie is all about community. It's like you're building a family, and that was all built from us from growing up with Jewish identity, and all the people that you met growing up with and how you connected to them. And I bring that to running these TV shows, where it's just like all of you are now in this family and we're all helping each other and guiding each other. And I think that all comes from what we learned growing up as Jews.
I was married to my writing partner, who I met in the Peter Stark producing program, who was not Jewish. And that was not why the marriage failed, by the way. And he just wasn't a nice person. That's why. And when I got divorced, one of the things I tried to do was figure out like what my Jewish community was going to be, because every time I sort of been lost in my life, my Jewishness was like a thing that I returned to. It was a thing I returned to when I was at Tufts and I felt lost. It was a thing that like I found in my teenage years when I felt lost. So then, I got this divorce, which meant I was pulling the pin on the grenade of like my work and my entire life at the same time. And I went synagogue shopping, and when I tell you I went to every service all over town, and Ikar was the place that I found that aligned with my value, which I didn't really know I was looking for, right? Like, it wasn't like I need to find a place that aligns with my values. I didn't know which way was up, so I didn't know what values were. But the second that I got there, I knew that this was a place that took my Jewishness and meshed it with my values. And it's a grounding place, both for the reason that we were talking about earlier, which is like, this job is so crazy and everything is so crazy. And like, what is success? And who the hell knows the answer to that question? But like, when you walk into that room every Saturday, which is why it was like so deeply a loss during the pandemic to like not have that, especially as like a lonely single parent, like running a television show and like crazy business. It's really amazing to have like those people who ask you how you are and want to know the answer, like actually want to know how you are. But also that it's a place that like talks a lot about values and considers values very deeply. And I feel like my work changed in a huge way when I joined, because I was thinking all the time about how I wanted to align what I was putting out into the world with this community and the values that this community espoused. I don't know that I would have sold Home Before Dark was a slog to get off the ground. I don't know that I would have been able to hoist a television show about a 9-year-old reporter investigating, a female 9-year-old reporter investigating murders, if I hadn't been part of Ikar. So I don't know if that's Ikar or Jewishness or both, but that's how I view it.
Well, they are related.
One other thing that came to mind for me was also, I feel like my Jewish education and like my bat mitzvah experience at Kehila in Berkeley, like that really taught me how to like think critically and like read text closely, which is like really important as an actor to like, you know, be a close reader of the text. And that's a very Jewish thing to like fight about, like, what does this trope, how does this impact the way we understand this verse? And also to think, I think also like as writers, like think about like, what's the message, what's the teaching that people are getting from your storytelling? And I think like, hopefully there's a sense of like responsibility as storytellers that we feel that we learned from Jewishness.
I wanna piggyback on that, Marnina, because I think that's very well setting up for a continuation of this question, which you also brought. You're all MVPs as far as I'm concerned. There's no favorites. But in terms of this question, Marnina has really kind of bookended it very nicely. To talk a little bit about this issue of authentic casting, which means that Jews play Jews, which, you know, there are issues with on both sides. It is not necessarily the same. I'm also getting some shaking heads.
I disagree. I don't think this is a both sides thing, but okay.
Really? Okay. So, we'll get to that for sure. So the question when we're talking about authentic casting, just to set it up for people who don't necessarily, not the people in this room, you all know what I'm talking about, but if anybody is confused by the use of authentic casting, you know, Jews playing Jewish characters, you know, people with the same experience playing whatever role has that particular experience, and it's provoked a big conversation. Sounds like I feel like I want to talk to Dara first about this, because she says that there is no both sides. So I want to hear about that, and then I think we can take it from there. I think this is just going to be some really interesting opinions in this room. So, Dara, why don't you kick us off?
I mean, look, I'm taking the controversial position because I can. And I feel like it's the right thing to do. I mean, if Al Pacino is not playing a Latin character, and we all agree that he shouldn't be at this moment, at this juncture in the world, like Michelle Williams should not be playing a Jew. Like this feels very cut and dry to me. If we're in an era of caring about authenticity and caring about life experience and caring about like what people are bringing to these roles, then I don't know why Jewishness is something that's different. And the debate to me feels oddly almost like bordering on anti-Semitic in a way that I can't quite put my finger on. Like, you know, Jews have privilege and like they're sort of white, and therefore like that authenticity doesn't apply to this particular group. And I just disagree with it wholeheartedly.
Anyone?
Question.
Marnina. Oh, next question.
I think we did it.
We're done with that. Okay. Interesting.
Well, look, I think I think authenticity is really, really important. I do get a bit concerned though about the conversation, because I do think it becomes a bit reductive, and my hope is that art, you know, opens windows and doors to worlds. And I mean, again, I'm self-interested in this. I want to be able to tell the stories that that move me and that I hope will move an audience. And I do see a narrowing of which stories, you know, I'm allowed to tell because I'm a white Jewish guy, and I get it. I get the moment that we're in, and but it's concerning to me. I'm concerned that in being inclusive, are we actually narrowing our like window of concern a little bit? And I'm just, it's concerning for me, is what I'll say. If that makes sense.
Yeah, it's a
I think it's
I was just gonna say, I don't know if there's that much to say about, other than it's a tricky one, like David's saying, because yes, I mean there's a lot where it's a problem, you know, that we can't ignore. I mean, look, there's authentic casting, there's, diversity in writers' rooms and in giving people opportunities. There's so many things that I think need to change and we need to work and look at. It just sometimes it becomes so just it's got to be this way or it's got to be that way. And I do think there is, like, conversation is important. I'll just say that, like, talking about this, talking about it, not putting it aside, or these conversations need to happen because nothing changes without conversation. And so I think it's why you're bringing it up, Esther. Like, it's important to talk about these things, but I do also, to David's point, like, I do think there are moments where it's just becoming such a blanket thing that the conversation stops, which becomes a problem when the conversation stops. I think dialogue is crucial about everything. So that's what I'll.
Thank you. And I think that this is a very robust issue, and I think we could have a whole second event on this question alone. But we are at 5 of the hour, and so I wanted to just break to see if there are any questions from either in the chat or in the room. Saul, you'll let us know if anybody's raising a hand and all that kind of good stuff. Anyone have questions?
We do have one question in the room.
Okay.
Yeah.
Speak from here?
Yeah, speak from there and we'll see how it goes.
Hi, I was, when Marnina was talking about authentic casting initially, I was thinking about Rachel Brosnahan and Mrs. Maisel, who personally I think she does a great job, but she's not Jewish. And then when David was talking about it from a writing point of view, it seems to me, maybe I'm completely off base, that there's a difference between writing from an authentic place or representational place and acting, where you're acting, right? So there's so many of those characteristics that you don't have the person that you're portraying. Where is that line drawn?
It's not about a lot. Like, look, I love to talk to David and Dan and Marnina about this stuff. So, like, I'm like saying a blanket thing on a panel because it's fun for me. Like, obviously this is a conversation. But I mean, my answer to that, as someone who still finds myself as a showrunner having to fight to bring in actors with disabilities, having to fight to find the right actor to play that part, is like, look, this is, to me, this is about giving people opportunities. And these are people who have not gotten their foot in the door because we keep talking. We keep, like, people I've been out here for 25 years and we've been having this conversation for 25 years. And while I totally agree with these guys that, like, it feels like we're not talking anymore and, like, it needs to be a nuanced conversation and all those things are true, but I've been hearing those conversations for decades and watching things move marginally until recently, when, because it became kind of a blanket thing because of, cancel culture or whatever you want to call it, people started, because it had a capitalistic consequence to not do it that way, right? In the Heights didn't do it the right way. It had a capitalistic consequence for the work. And now that it has a capitalistic consequence, people are paying attention to that stuff. Yes, Rachel Brosnahan's great. The show's great. I don't think anyone's, Al Pacino is a great actor. He probably shouldn't have been playing a Latino dude. Like, to me, the conversation is about letting people, for example, Marnina, who, like she said, exudes a certain amount of Jewishness. There was a moment in time not too long ago where it would have been way harder for her to get parts because she was exuding that Jewishness. Like, being in an era where we want people, it's almost like the argument until recently, when I first got out here, was ignore my gender, ignore my ethnicity, ignore my whoever I am, hire me because I'm the best person for the job. It's a 180 argument now, which I think is the right one. Hire me because of what I bring to the table. Hire me because of my life experience, because my face looks different. And I think that's the framework through which we have to start to look at this stuff.
All right, well, we have a couple of questions in the chat. Although, like, I the joys and the challenges of that show are many. And if anybody wants, since I'm here, I might as well plug my podcast, The Bagel Report, which talks about Jews and pop culture. And we have at least 5 episodes that talk about the marvelous Mrs. Maisel. And it seems clear to me, and I'm sure the other panelists will agree with me that Marnina should have been a featured player, if not the featured player in the marvelous Mrs. Maisel. She exudes a certain Maiselness and a certain timeless charm that would really have situated her in that world very nicely. So
Thank you.
again, you're welcome. She knows I'm a fan. If she didn't know before, she knows now. So, you know, I think that this is something that I'm always happy to talk about. If anybody wants to be in touch with me or listen to my podcast, we talk about it all the time. And I think that everybody agrees that you don't have to have been in the Marines to be a cast member in A Few Good Men, right? If you have, then it does inform your performance. And so I think that one of the things that we've been talking about recently is the role that, starting sentence over, that there are TV shows and films in which, nope, still don't have it. Sorry about that. It's happened sometimes. The post-COVID brain fog or something like that. I don't know. My point is that I have a lot to say on this, and I'm having trouble kind of wrapping my brain around the actual grain of it. So that's a to be continued kind of conversation.
I feel similarly. I'm holding back because I could talk about it for a full other hour and a half. But like an extreme example is like Leonard Bernstein being not only played by Bradley Cooper in a prosthetic nose, but also like written by him, directed by him. And like, that hurts to me. That hurts. Like he's one of ours. Like he meant a lot to my Bubby and Zadie. And like, you know, it feels like you couldn't have chosen a Jew to be, you know, at least one of those, like the fact that it's all him, like, and I think maybe like his family chose him or something, but like also part of it is like internalized anti-Semitism of people being like, oh, we want this, you know, even Jewish creators and producers and writers choosing non-Jews to play Jewish roles because they're more likable or more relatable to a broader audience. Or like if it was Leonard Bernstein's family who chose Bradley Cooper, it's like, you guys, like, have more Jews in the room when you're telling a Jewish story. And that's especially true for Orthodox Judaism as well. I know this is a whole other thing, or like any sort of ritual, Jewish ritual, they get it wrong all the time. Even though, or maybe because there's Jewish writers who are part of it.
One of the things that we're talking about authentic portrayals, and you're talking about authentic ritual, as many of us know, because we are not in a strictly Orthodox space, any of us, we are much more likely to produce Jewish moments that are not necessarily viewed by Orthodox people as authentic. But if we grow up with a certain tradition and that's what we're portraying, then, you know, people who grew up in a slightly different tradition might not recognize it, might not call it authentic Judaism. And, you know, obviously I want to be in a space where nobody has to say what Judaism is authentic. I just want it to be correct for whatever that world is. So, you know, we talked a little bit about Dan's brother Todd was just a Jewish consultant on the film You People, which is out now. And whatever people say about the rest of the movie, they talk about how great the Yom Kippur scene and how accurate it was and how it looked great. And so I think that it's about portraying within the world that you writers are creating, you know, to have authentic portrayals within that world is something that I think everybody should be aspiring to. Okay, so yeah, as Marnina says, let's solve diversity in 5 minutes.
Yeah. I will just say that to Dara's point that she brought up, it's like there is a problem where the conversation happens and there's no action. There's this sense of like, if we're talking about it, then we're doing it. And it is, they have to go hand in hand. Like like you can't just talk about it and that makes you feel better about how you're handling it, whether you're studio, showrunner, director, writer. Like these things have to, like there has to be action, and sometimes that action has to be pushed and forced, and or no one will listen to it. It's, you know, it was early on with like, oh yeah, we have a diversity program at our studio. It's like, yeah, but none of those writers are like really getting hired. Like, so you're like, how are you? So there's these conversations are crucial, but without the action, it's all lip service. And so it's trying to find this right balance of
That's very Jewish, Dan, to say it's about the action.
Yeah.
Yes, I think that's very, I was thinking the same thing, Marnina. That's so Jewish. It's like, you have to walk the walk.
There are a couple of questions that came up in the chat. One of them seems a little bit more like a comment than a question, but I'm going to share it with you in case you have any responses to it. So when it was during the conversation about successes and failures, where we talked about what success, how you define those things, and Magdalene writes, so success is creating and accomplishing concrete things, while fame and fortune is those things plus an almost unfathomable amount of luck. Thoughts? Yes? No?
I mean, it's those things plus a lot of people, I guess, viewing and being fans of your work. And one of the things I was thinking about after I answered that question, by the way, was like, one of the things that makes me feel successful is like, it doesn't matter if it's like one of the shows I was on that like 2 people watched. If one person has said to me, like, I watched your episode when I had cancer in the hospital and it like gave me so much joy, I was like, that's it. That was the reason I did the thing. That's success. I mean, success is like fame and celebrity and success are all kind of all of those things. Sure. There's a certain amount of luck, but there's a certain amount of luck to like where any of us have gotten to. And, you know, luck, my dad always used to say, luck is preparation meets opportunity. And that just means you just keep banging your head into the wall until you break through. It's that resilience that Dan was talking about.
On my first movie, Zombies, they had an event where they unveiled the soundtrack like a month before the movie came out, and I like reluctantly went to it with like my wife and kids, and Sharon was like, "You got to go to this. It's at the Grove. We got to go. It's at Barnes and Noble's at the Grove." And it seemed like it was being downplayed by the studio, not a big deal. And when we walked in, the soundtrack was playing, which was cool. But what took my breath away was there were all these kids there who had already learned all the music. And for me, that was just such an amazing moment. I was like, oh my, like we kind of create this this material and this work stuff. And sometimes we're so removed from our audience and the people who are enjoying it. And it was just an incredible moment with just kids singing the songs and really connecting and like an emotional and a fun way. And I don't know, just the joy of that moment was like an amazing, I guess, moment of success. And regardless of how the movie did and all that stuff, I just, I was very much tapped into, oh, we created this thing and people are responding. And that was super powerful.
Yeah, the luck is such a weird thing to talk about because it's like, yeah, there's times you feel lucky, there's times you don't, there's times you don't feel lucky, but you're so grateful you had that unlucky experience because it made you grow into the next thing. So it's just, you know, Esther, you said it actually perfectly, which is like your path, it's just everybody's going to have different paths and there's different reasons why that happens and how that happens, and sort of need to ride that wave. And to what David's saying is like, I'm having, you know, this is my first experience. We're literally making the book series that is, it is what it means to children and now adults who've been reading it for 20 years, what that means to them. And I'm working with the author Rick Riordan, who like this is his legacy and his baby, and you just feel this. There's times when you're telling these stories, whether it's whatever kind of story it is, you feel this responsibility. You feel this responsibility of what you're putting out there. I'm feeling it like times 11 right now of heightened, because it's like, oh, I could crush a lot of kids' dreams if this doesn't work. Like, it's like, that stinks. So like you put pressure on yourself that it's like, everyone's waiting for this thing. The first version that they did 12 years ago didn't work. We're now doing the authentic version. And there is a lot of that pressure. And I think it fuels you, like the way David's talking about hearing that music for the first time. It is what drives you to like, I want that feeling. I want everyone to have that feeling with what you put out there. Because my film professor just often reminded, it's like, this is the one business that it's like, you are making it for yourself. You have to love the process to stay in it, but you are actually, there is that moment where you are releasing it, and you're releasing it to the world, and now it's theirs and it's not yours anymore. And that is a very weird feeling where it's just like, you have to let it go, and you hope people like it, and you hope it works. And if it doesn't, I've done those, like it doesn't, you're just like, okay, what did I gain from that? What did I learn from that? What did that give me? Why did I love the process? But you have to, like for all of us, you have to love the process, because the success, oh, that show comes out and it does really well. It's like, they watch it, everybody loves it, or they're on to the next thing. And so you have to just fully immerse yourself into this stuff, and hope it works, and hope people, appreciate the stuff you put out there, and that it's worth the sacrifice.
That is a perfect place to end. Thank you, Dan. We already lost Dara, who had to go get her kid, but we want to thank her for modeling what it is to have a career and a family and be responsible to everything. So thank you in absentia, Dara. I also want to thank Marnina and David and Dan, and of course Saul, for bringing us all together, and the Middleman Jewish Community Center for having us today. I thought this was fascinating. I could have gone another hour or two, but maybe next time. And there was one more question that that was in the chat, and it was very practical about how to find what the path is to find a producer. And I don't know if anybody had for a project, if anybody has any suggestions about that, you can put them in the chat or whatever. But I want to thank you all for being here, to the people who are putting questions in the chat and participating in other ways. And really appreciate all of you. So thank you.
I will jump on. Richard, I saw your comment, and I'll try and figure a way to pass it along. First, I want to thank our panelists. I want to thank our moderator, Esther. Esther, who I originally met on Twitter before you actually moved to LA, and then you are like the first person who I could say, I met you there, and then we actually became friends, and I'm grateful for that experience. Marnina and Dan and David and Dara, who left. In some ways, this is a love letter for Ikar, which was my shul in my community in LA, and I miss so much many times, and so I'm just grateful that you could all be here. I've known David since 1984 when I met him at Camp Vermont in the Poconos. He's the best hockey captain I've ever met, so I'm also really proud of him because he only casts real zombies as the zombies, and he's very authentic in his casting, and so I really do appreciate that. That part
You
of what
still
he
have
does.
to have great cheekbones, Saul. You still have to have great bone structure.
He does know that I also am still on him for getting the Hooters song "All You Zombies" into his show, but I'll leave that there. I want to thank our sponsors. I want to thank Barry and Carla Benson, First Republic Bank, Gewurz Menashe, Turner Construction Company, and our presenting sponsor, Jeff Reingold, Income Property Management. We are going to have a art exhibit here at the JCC called The Humans of Israel, starting in March. It is an amazing series that you can think of like Humans of New York, and it's similar for Israel. And we are actually going to have Erez Kaganowitz, who is the photographer here on May 9th. On March 23rd, we are going to have Bob Gordon for a ukulele lunch concert. Bob Gordon was Van Morrison's attorney and Jerry Garcia's personal attorney and the Doobie Brothers. And so you should definitely come see that. He's an amazing gentleman. And our day for the J, as Steve mentioned, will be April 23rd. And sponsorships are available. Grateful for all of you. And thanks so much. We'll see you on TV.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye. Thank you.
Hello.